My name is Charles Onunaiju. I am Director of Center for China Studies, being a journalist, and then get into research and scholarly pursuit, but are all tied together. Above all, a Nigerian patriot who wants Nigeria to work. Keen to see Nigeria work so that we can have the benefit of our young people like you. There could be really great room for young people with lots of energy and ideas to come forth with it. So we continue to push the frontiers until we can get there. Thank you for the opportunity. The Center for China Studies was established against the background of increasing cooperation between China and Nigeria, China and Africa. We wanted to provide a think tank to clarify some of the issues involved, because China-African cooperation is about one of the most distorted, one of the most misunderstood, and especially from the China side, we've had experience with Western colonialism, and there's always a question: are we moving from Western colonialism to China one? So these apprehensions about China intentions and the way we should respond to China outreach informed the establishment of the Center for China Studies. That is the reason why we established the Center for China Studies, to provide some clarifications, and give some scholarly eruditions to issues relating to our two sides. Yeah, these are some of the reasons for which our center was established, to continuously clarify and explain the question. In the first place, imperialism is determined by the nature of the state. The faction of the ruling clique that is in charge of the state determines whether a state becomes imperialistic, because it must serve a stratum, it must serve a certain stratum of the social force of any particular country. In the case of China, the founding of modern China came out of a very long-drawn struggle that overthrew capitalism, overthrew bureaucratism, overthrew imperialist domination. China itself was a victim of imperialist domination. The whole of 19th century, the Chinese call it our century of humiliation, when China was a colony not just of one power, of several powers. At the turn of the 20th century, Beijing, the capital, was under the colonial occupation of several Western countries. So China itself understood very well what it means to be under imperialist domination. It understood very well. It experienced for the most part of its 19th century. China was carved up. China was dominated. And from the experience it has had, it vowed, we will never repeat what has happened to us. And by the way, the ruling governing party in China is the Communist Party of China, a representative of the working people of China, the broadest interest of the Chinese people. It does not represent a particular class. It does not represent a particular ruling class. It is a representative of the Chinese people, the Communist Party of China. So there is nothing in the social character of China modern states that approximate to imperialism. Fine, it's not a one-way traffic. Nigeria has also made contribution to China. After founding of modern China in 1949, China was deprived of a lawful seat at the United Nations until 1971, when Nigeria, among other 76 countries, and 26 African countries voted overwhelmingly to return China to the United Nations. For the Chinese, this is a landmark. For the Chinese, this is an important milestone, not only in the development of their country, but it is very, very important in their international partnership. They never forget. Every little Chinese boy you meet will tell you, Chairman Mao always tell us that it was our African brother that took us back to the United Nations. So for them, it is an important milestone and represent a foundation for Nigeria-China relation. Nigeria-China established diplomatic relation in 1971, February 1971. Just 9 months after, Nigeria joined the rest of African countries, about 26 of them, in returning China to the United Nations. So this is an epic and epochal moment in China history, and they never forget. So this is actually the foundation. So in terms of favor, we delivered favor to China first. I just want you to know this, that Nigeria first delivered favor, recognizing the People's Republic of China in February 10th, 1971, and following up with being a part of the struggle to return China to the United Nations. So this was for them very important. And the election has been developing since then, until around 20. Of course, Nigerian former head of state, General Gowon, visited China in 1974, meeting the legendary Chairman Mao and consolidating our bilateral cooperation with China. And since then, it's been a great run. We've had diplomatic cooperation. In 2000, at the turn of the 21st century, China and Africa founded the China-African Forum on China-African Cooperation, FOCAC, which holds ministerial meeting and summit every 3 years. And that was a game changer. Nigeria was also represented at the founding of Forum on China-African Cooperation in 2000. And since that time, cooperation between China and Africa has become very, very vast. For the 16 years in a straight row, China has been Africa's largest trading partner. Nigeria must respond in policy-wise, especially now China has provided an opening, a concessional access to huge markets, which means we can balance our trade. It doesn't have to be one-sided again. They have offered an access, concessional access to their huge market. So the ball returns back to our court. We have the China are looking, in fact, as of 2018, China instituted what they call China-Africa Trade and Economic Expo that holds every 2 years in China, in which African countries are asked to bring to China what they have to offer. And I can assure you a whole lot of African countries have been responding to this. Kenya is exporting mangoes and flour. South Africa is exporting beer, is exporting meat. Zambia is exporting meat. A whole lot of African countries are exporting. Ghana is exporting soya bean. I understand we have the best of sesame seed, we have the best of soya bean, we have cashew, we have ginger. So what stops us from taking advantage of the concessional access to Chinese market? It will depend on our government to respond to these policies so that the relationship will not be unbalanced. That's why I told you, if the engagement between Nigeria and China turns out dependent, it will not be because China intended it. It will be because we failed to respond in kind to the policy initiative to close the gap. Like you know, and this has implications for even our national security. Economic diversification also has implications for national security. I can assure you that if a host of bandits and militants know that you could become a ginger farmer millionaire, you could become a soya bean billionaire, you could become a cashew billionaire, they will drop their arms. And if they are aware they have a secured market, stable market, with concessional access, why wouldn't they? But it has to do with our governance strategy. How are we responding to China initially? How are we responding to the opportunity of China? I've always said, China and Africa are both opportunities to themselves. But as you know, opportunities can exist even for an individual for all his life. If you don't make a move to convert these opportunities into your advantage, it will remain just opportunity for the rest of your life. The same for nations. When opportunities are there and you did not step up in terms of converting this opportunity to real advantage, it could last for as long as it's there. So I believe that China opening and continuous opening and continuous policy initiative to engage Africa represent an important step in making our relation mutually beneficial, a win-win, and not that of dependency. But we have to step up. China's loans has always been concessional with very low interest rate and a long period of repayment. And they came in form of, like the Mambela power plant China was providing 5.2 billion US dollars, with Nigeria coming up with 500 million US dollars as counterpart funding. So China provides 85% concessional loan, which are always structured in such a way that the project itself could pay back. Apart from the services, apart from the improved social services it could render, it is also designed to be economically viable in such a way that it can pay back itself. So these loans are not asphyxiating, and China has always been ready for renegotiating where there is issues. China is very aware of sustainability questions when it comes to concessional loans. And it is structured in such a way that it does not add to the burden of the recipient countries. And it is not aimed at making recipient countries dependent on China, but rather to make them independent and stand and speak on their own. This is actually the nature of China loan. It is concessional with very marginal interest rate, and the duration is spaced out in such a way that the recipient countries are not asphyxiated. So it is not in any way similar to the Western loans, the Western loan bodies. And by the way, if you check our debt office, China loans still represent very insignificant, about 5% of our entire loan exposure, our debt exposure. We are much more to private lenders and all that. China loan to Nigeria is about less than 5%, the least of all our debt exposure. But because it makes sense to talk about China loan trap, the origin is the West. They are not given. I remember in one of former President Buhari's interview, the Chinese television asked him about the China loan. And he said, if I can get it elsewhere, anybody who is willing to give me, I can forfeit Chinese loan. But nobody else is willing to give me. Only the Chinese is willing to give me. So why wouldn't I take? But then at the end of the day, these loans we have to come up with our counterpart funding. And when these projects are executed, we should also provide enabling, because infrastructure itself is not an end. It's only a means. It's an enabler. Take, for example, the Barrow Port in Niger State, constructed at a cost of over 4 billion US naira, and dredge, the Niger dredge. But the relevant infrastructure, including road networks, were never built. That port today is stagnated. It's a burden. It's a debt capital because we've not done what we should do. The port has been built, handed over, but we refuse to build ancillary facilities that will make the port viable. Today, it is a wreck. That is since 2018. It was inaugurated by President Buhari, but it's been lying there. The city rail from the city center to the airport was also inaugurated by President Buhari in 2018. 500 million US dollars concessional loan from China. This is how many years it was commissioned. Not single train is running there. The tracks have been stolen because we have not responded with what we want to do with it. We've not done the right thing. They're still wasting away. By the way, the question is, do we even need to build a railway line between city center and airport, which has about the best road in Nigeria? There are many places where that rail could have, but these are some of the challenges. So we need to up our hands. We need to drive relevant domestic policy, just like the China had provided concessional access for Nigerian agricultural products. I'm not sure stakeholders in the industry. I learned Bauchi had the best sesame seed. I learned Borno has tomatoes. Yobe has tomatoes. Kaduna has ginger. I understand even that the Lebanese and Arabs go to Kaduna, buy those ginger, set up small tertiary factories to process it and sell it to the Chinese. So what stops our government from supporting the farmers with concessional loans, with finance, and other relevant things to support them into doing this and adding value and reaping the full benefit of it? So the whole lot has to depend on our government. The whole lot has to depend on our government. I think China has been very clear that all her citizens' enterprises must abide by the local laws. They should be subject to the local laws. And should they infract on this local law, they should be adequately punished. This position is not only Chinese position, but I am aware that the embassy in Nigeria has reiterated this position at all times, that all Chinese enterprises and citizens in Nigeria should abide by the local laws, just like Nigerians in China are enjoined to abide by local laws. And those who made the mistake of infracting on China laws don't get spared. And the Chinese expect that those of their citizens and enterprises who did the same here should not be spared by our law. So it's very clear. The Chinese government is very clear that all Chinese, both their enterprises and citizens, resident anywhere in the world, should abide by the local laws and respect the rules. And should any of them take a step in the wrong direction that infract on the laws of their host countries, they should be dealt according to the law. And sometimes when they are returned to China also, they get punished again. So China has zero tolerance for citizens or enterprises that take the laws into their hands. Well, I tell you something. China has made very clear that it does not intend to replace the United States. It does not intend. The institutions it builds or it contributes to build are basically to supplement and to fill the deficit. Because some of the institutions that are predominant in the West were created when most countries in the global South are still coming up. They did not have contribution in designing their architecture. So China said there is a lacuna in the institutions. There is lag. And we are supporting the building of modern institutions to support the existing one, not to displace them. China does not intend to displace the United States. Neither does China intend to displace existing institutions. Institutions like BRICS is a mechanism for engagement among major emerging countries. If you remember, it was even the word BRICS was coined by an American investor, who thought about few countries that will become very significant in the 2000s. He spoke about Brazil, India, China, of course, Russia, that these countries will become very important. And the countries concerned took it very serious and began to engage. Of course, the first meeting was held in Yekaterinburg in 2002, and they began to formalize instrument of it. And at the same time, I tell you something, people don't understand. The same man who modeled BRICS also modeled what they called Mint. Mint was Mexico, Indonesia, Nigeria, and Turkey. They were considered also as emerging economies that would become preeminent. But interestingly, out of the Mint countries, only Nigeria did not cross the threshold. Despite the promise we hold as an emerging economy, we never really emerged. The rest of the Mint become members of the G20. If you like the economic oligarchy of the world, the G20, including countries in the West and all the BRICS members and all the Mint countries, Mexico, Indonesia, and Turkey are all members of the G20. Only Nigeria did not meet the threshold of an emerging economy. And you can imagine how, of course, Nigerian elite do not care about all this. They do not care. Everybody knows that. We are supposed to be one of the leading emerging economies. We held significant and important promise as an emerging economy with considerable influence in the direction and architecture of the new international economic order. But here we are. Here we are. So, BRICS, like I said, is an informal mechanism. And now it's become very significant. It's become a significant economic bloc in the world. It has already instituted an outreach. As you may know, Nigeria was admitted as a partner in their last meeting. Not yet a full member, as a partner in the BRICS, and I think that is a significant step forward for us. It offers market, it offers investment, so it has real prospects to support economic recovery. Well, I tell you something, China has made very clear that it does not intend to replace the United States. It does not intend. The institutions it builds or it contributes to build are basically to supplement and to fill the deficit. Because some of the institutions that are predominant in the West were created where most countries in the global South are still coming up. They did not have contribution in designing their architecture. So China said there is a lacuna in the institutions. There is lag. And we are supporting the building of modern institutions to support the existing one, not to displace them. China does not intend to displace United States. Neither does China intend to displace existing institutions. Institutions like BRICS is a mechanism for engagement among major emerging countries. If you remember, it was even the word BRICS was coined by an American investor, who thought about few countries that will become very significant in the 2000s. He spoke about Brazil, India, China, of course, Russia, that these countries will become very important. And the countries concerned took it very serious and began to engage. Of course, the first meeting was held in Yekaterinburg in 2002. And they begin to formalize instrument of it. And at the same time, I tell you something, people don't understand. The same man who modeled BRICS also modeled what they called Mint. Mint was Mexico, Indonesia, Nigeria, and Turkey. They were considered also as emerging economies that would become preeminent. But interestingly, out of the Mint countries, only Nigeria did not cross the threshold. Despite the promise we hold as an emerging economy, we never really emerged. The rest of the Mint become members of the G20. If you like the economic oligarchy of the world, the G20, including countries in the West and all the BRICS members and all the Mint countries, Mexico, Indonesia, and Turkey are all members of the G20. Only Nigeria did not meet the threshold of an emerging economy. And you can imagine how, of course, Nigerian elite do not care about all this. They do not care. Everybody knows that. We are supposed to be one of the leading emerging economies. We held significant and important promise as an emerging economy with considerable influence in the direction and architecture of the new international economic order. But here we are. Here we are. So, BRICS, like I said, is an informal mechanism. And now it's become very significant. It's become a significant economic bloc in the world. It has already instituted an outreach. As you may know, Nigeria was admitted as a partner in their last meeting, not yet a full member, as a partner in the BRICS, and I think that is a significant step forward for us. It offers market, it offers investment, so it has real prospects to support economic recovery if we take it serious, if we ever take it serious. Well, I tell you something, China has made very clear that it does not intend to replace United States. It does not intend. The institutions it builds or it contributes to build are basically to supplement and to fill the deficit. Because some of the institutions that are predominant in the West were created where most countries in the global South are still coming up. They did not have contribution in designing their architecture. So China said there is a lacuna in the institutions. There is lag. And we are supporting the building of modern institutions to support the existing one, not to displace them. China does not intend to displace United States. Neither does China intend to displace existing institutions. Institutions like BRICS is a mechanism for engagement among major emerging countries. If you remember, it was even the word BRICS was coined by an American investor, who thought about few countries that will become very significant in the 2000s. He spoke about Brazil, India, China, of course, Russia, that these countries will become very important. And the countries concerned took it very serious and began to engage. Of course, the first meeting was held in Yekaterinburg in 2002. And they begin to formalize instrument of it. And at the same time, I tell you something, people don't understand. The same man who modeled BRICS also modeled what they called Mint. Mint was Mexico, Indonesia, Nigeria, and Turkey. They were considered also as emerging economies that will become preeminent. But you know, interestingly, out of the mint countries, only Nigeria did not cross the threshold. Despite the promise we hold as an emerging economy, we never really emerged. The rest of the mint become members of the G20. If you like the economic oligarchy of the world, the G20, including countries in the West and all the BRICS members and all the mint countries, Mexico, Indonesia, and Turkey are all members of the G20. Only Nigeria did not meet the threshold of an emerging economy. And you can imagine how, of course, Nigerian elite do not care about all this. They do not care. Everybody knows that. We are supposed to be one of the leading emerging economies. We held significant and important promise as an emerging economy with considerable influence in the direction and architecture of the new international economic order. But here we are. Here we are. So, BRICS, like I said, is an informal mechanism. And now it's become very significant. It's become a significant economic bloc in the world. You know, it has already instituted an outreach. As you may know, Nigeria was admitted as a partner in their last meeting, not yet a full member, as a partner in the BRICS, and I think that is a significant step forward for us. It offers market, it offers investment, so it has real prospects to support economic recovery if we take it serious, if we ever take it serious. Just want to stress, because China has eschewed alliance since its founding. Since China was founded, modern China was founded in 1949. China has eschewed any form of alliance. It does not. China seeks broad partnership, what it considers global partnership. It's in partnership for everybody. Because China has the impression that being an allied with somebody means you are aligned against someone. And its outlook is to build alliance, to build global partnership across the board. Of course, China relation with countries like Russia, or with the global south, of course, appear more warm. And like I said earlier, I do not think China intends to replace United States. It does not want to be a hegemon. It does not want to be a policeman of the world. China is too much aware of history, of those who have tried to police the world, that they do not want to do that. By the nature of its state, it does not want to become the hegemon, the new policeman of the world. It intends to reach out. It calls itself a major power not by its entitlement, but by the responsibility it seeks to discharge. And so far it's been doing that creditably well. China is the leading economic partner for more than 150 countries. China has also initiated the Belt and Road Initiative. Belt and Road Initiative is a framework for connectivity, global connectivity, infrastructure connectivity, people-to-people engagement. And to show that it puts its money where its mouth is, China has expended more than $1 trillion in Belt and Road construction. And currently, it has more than 153 countries as partners of the Belt and Road, and almost 30 institutions as partners. Nigeria also is an important partner of the Belt and Road Initiative. We signed on to it in 2018. And since then, we have China engagement with Nigeria have delivered more tangible benefit, including the Lekki Deep Sea Port, which was built in a record 3 years under the framework of the Belt and Road Initiative. So China reaches out to the world, not seeking alliances, but seeking broad partnership. And in my view, this has left it unentangled with the obligations of alliances, of building what China calls small yard and high fences, like NATO will do, creating problems here. It looks at itself as a problem solver, that from its own experience, and as it accumulates greater national aggregates, as it becomes more prosperous, it believes that its prosperity can only be more sustainable if the world prospers. So China set out to share its experience with the rest of the world, not only sharing its experience in governance and development, it also contributes tangibly in draining the swamp of poverty across the world where it can. So I believe for United States, despite the difficult elections, despite the effort by the U.S. ruling circles to contain China, China continued to extend goodwill and believe that the United States is such an important country that most problems of the world cannot be easily resolved without U.S. contribution. So China engages United States and opens its hand for engagement with United States and has never shown any intention to replace United States or assume United States role. China deplores any intention to become a superpower. It said, we will never be a superpower. China will forever, according to its leadership, belong to the developing countries and will never be a superpower, no matter how big it grows or how powerful it becomes. These are solemn pledges, a solemn pledge of Chinese founders and continued by its current leadership. To be very honest, China has not been silent. Right from the very first time, China has been very active in the Middle East. Remember, the long-running rivalry between Saudi Arabia and Iran was resolved in Beijing. It was resolved in Beijing. I think that's one of the most fears of the United States, that China influence in the Middle East is growing. The long-running rival, which was almost a mutual suspicion that could have led to anything between Saudi Arabia and Iran, was resolved in Beijing. And right from the time this problem started, China has been one of using its position in the United States, in the United Nations, to advance. It has consistently called for a ceasefire. Of course, like you know, it is the United States that has always vetoed every resolution relating to ceasefire, relating to stopping the war, relating to stopping the killing. And China has been in the forefront of several initiatives at the United Nations calling for the end of the war. And beside that, China has been a net donor of humanitarian support. China was one of the first countries to stop its ships from coming to the ports, Haifa ports in Israel, immediately after the war, as part of its commitment to pressure Israel to stop the war. So China has been a strong voice. It is only the United States has been Israeli enabler, and the West in general has been Israeli enabler. It's only recently that most countries in Europe have started to make the afterthought move to recognize the Palestinian state. Like you know, China has recognized Palestinian state, and Palestine has a functional embassy in Beijing. So China has been very, very supportive of UN Resolution 242 calling for a two-state solution and has made meaningful contribution. In fact, even during the conflict between PLO and Hamas, China has hosted a number of meetings in Beijing to bridge the gap between the Palestinian factions and supporting them to find a common ground. So China has not been silent. It's been very active. The point is that the country with the most influence in the region, United States, has decided to be in collusion with the Zionist clique, with the criminal faction of the Netanyahu regime in those murdering spree. I do not even consider what is happening in Gaza a war. In my view, Israel is in a murdering spree. You can't be at war with an entity that has no formal state. There's no military barrack to bomb. There is no strategic military site to bomb. You're bombing mosques, bombing churches, bombing market square, bombing camps, bombing schools. This is not, in my view, the act of an army. I consider the IDF a thuggish clique because I don't consider what is war. We are fighting war with a formal army, navy, air force, and the army barracks. You can see where the plane hangar. You can see military barracks. There is none in Gaza. There is none in Gaza. What you have in Gaza is hospitals. What Israel are bombing in Gaza is hospitals, it's schools, it's markets, it's the refugee camps. It's humanitarian organizations. So whom are you fighting a war? Like Iran, like in the case of Russia and Russia, we say we target their oil facility, we target their energy facility, we target their military production unit. There is no such thing in Gaza. Gaza has no ammunition dump. It has no military barrack. It has no air force facility. It has no navy. So whom are you really at war with? This is the question that people have not simply asked. They talk about war in Gaza. With who? With women and children and elderly, infirmed. So these are some of the challenges. But I can tell you that China has not been a passive onlooker. It's been active in trying to bring an end to the war. There is only one power that could call Israel to order. Ironically, that power has been more enabling than restraining of Israeli aggression in Gaza. That's United States, of course. That's United States. It's been more enabling of the crime in Gaza than constraining Israel in its all-out murdering spree. I see it as murdering spree. You are just on a murdering spree, because if you're at war, you should be confronting an army tank for tank. We should be just like we see in Ukraine. Russia destroyed their tanks. Sometimes they destroy Russia's own. The army is there. But in this case, there's no army. I've always stressed that China's experience or China's is not repeatable by anybody. It is unique in itself. And the strength of the Chinese system is because it is original. It is focused, even though China, the Communist Party, is founded on the theory and ideology of Marxism, Leninism, but it is Marxism, Leninism, that is indigenized, Sinicized, if you like. That is why the Chinese say we are building a socialist system with Chinese characteristics. So it is a Marxism with Chinese characteristics. It is a framework that takes into account China's national condition, China's existential social reality. There are no institution in China that was borrowed from anywhere. They were built from China's experience. And the crisis of Nigerian and African democracy is that our institutions do not reflect our reality. None of our institutions reflect our reality. Institutions are supposed to be a collection. It's supposed to be an aggregation of your own experiences, your own expectations, your own desires, your fears. All of them are supposed to coalesce in your institutions. So they became representative of you. In our own case, it's not. And that is why governance has been such a distant thing. It does not reflect, nobody holds anybody accountable. That's why what the Constitution said. Nobody holds anybody accountable. I keep saying, like you have National Assembly representing constituencies, representing the people. The people is such an amorphous definition. It's such a escapist definition. Who are the people? It's just like somebody asking you, if you're coming back from where you are, get me a fruit. I could simply come and tell you, I didn't know the type of fruit you wanted. If you are specific, orange, mango, yes, I can, but get me a fruit. Well, you've given me a reason to buy you nothing because you've not asked for anything. So when we say the people, whom are they? Are you talking about the working people? Are you talking about media people? Are you talking about journalists? Are you talking about medical doctors? Because if you have in our National Assembly a representative of the Nigerian Medical Association, of the Nigerian Teachers Union, of Nigerian Union of Journalists, you can't have your representative establish a constituency and make his unborn child a staff of the place. You cannot take money meant for your constituency and buy a house in Dubai. It's not going to happen. But that's exactly what happens. Because the people here is simply a reference to almost nothing. It's an excuse for being irresponsible. It's an excuse for being unaccountable to anybody. You understand? So I think we can make our institution more representative by designing it to reflect our reality, by designing it to reflect our fears and concerns. As far as we maintain this as selfless institution that do not reflect our reality, that do not reflect our historical condition, just like people say the rule of law. The rule of law in England, the rule of law in the United States, where it is never hoped that a public servant will steal $100 billion. Here, our rule of law, but people could steal such money and walk away, and they tell you they are covered by the rule of law. In the context of the British, where the rule of law, some of these concepts emanate, it is never imagined, it is never conceived that any public servant could walk away with as much as 100 billion naira from the public treasury and then ask the rule of law to apply to him. And when you're designing the charges, you simply say he misappropriated 100 billion. If you say, because of this money, almost 300,000 women are dying for being unable to access maternity health care. Almost 300,000 youth are roaming the street because it makes no sense. It makes more sense. It reflects our reality, because our reality is for every 1 billion taken, families go hungry. You must relate it. For every 1 billion stolen from the public purse, access to public education is restricted. For every 10 billion taken out of the public purse, young women are out in the streets. For every 10 billion taken out, primary schools cannot work. Women cannot access public health. So these things, we must reflect our reality and stop this legal escape. If we begin to reflect our reality in our institution and our laws, we'll be better than China. We'll not only be as good as China, but we will even move faster than China. So the only thing China did that has put it on a part of this modernization fast-track lane is because China designed her institutions from the reality of its own circumstances. It did not borrow the Westminster model. It did not borrow the American model. It designed its own model from China's own experiences. That is why just some 2 days ago, a mayor in China had just been sentenced to death for stealing an approximate of about 50 million naira. You know, this is a pocket change for public servants here to steal. Nothing happens. You know, but somebody is going to die for it. Because they understood the implication, not just of what happened, but for the rest of the Chinese people. So you can imagine what happens when somebody pockets 100 billion and the next day he gets crowd on the street, he gets 10 sons, and from adjournment, nothing is heard anymore. So we can't get anywhere because these institutions, processes are not a reflection of our reality.